We sing the words. They are beloved and they're comforting in their familiarity. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. We probably know that these words were recited originally by a pagan prophet named Balaam, found in this week's Sedra named Balak. And we might even know that Balaam's mission had been to curse the Israelites, but for reasons obvious and not so obvious, Balaam spoke words of praise that have survived more than 2,500 years. Our Sedra is rich, by the way, with literary devices. Who can ever forget Balaam's talking donkey, who could see an angel blocking his path, a vision that his master did not possess? Or how a political leader, Balak, king of Moab, tried to bribe a spiritual leader, Balaam, to do what Balaam really didn't want to do. Really, a political leader tried to influence a religious leader to get... Couldn't happen in our day. Or how that same spiritual leader who burst into spontaneous words of praise for Israel then became identified as a despised enemy of our people. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg has offered this less than warm appreciation of Balaam. He was vainglorious, honor-seeking, looking for money and social recognition above all else. He disregards God's explicit instructions. He tries to wheedle God into letting him grab hold of a big payoff from King Balak. Crazed by greed, Balaam ultimately makes a fool of himself, seeing less of the presence of God than even his beast of burden could do. I can only add that Balaam later on tried to apparently seduce Israel into idolatry, and for that reason the rabbis in the Talmud and in the Midrash heaped scorn upon him. For example, in Brachot we find Balaam was a rasha, a wicked one, or an avot, an evil eye, a haughty spirit, and a proud soul. These are the hallmarks of the disciples of Balaam the wicked. He wished to uproot an entire people for no reason. He caused the Holy Spirit to depart from the Gentiles, and since then, prophecy only exists in Israel. By the way, Balaam was one of Pharaoh's counselors, along with Jethro and Job. It's not in the Torah, rabbis talk. And it was Balaam's advice, they said, that the male Israelite children should be cast into the Nile River to be drowned. That's how they viewed Balaam. Is a surprise, therefore, that both the book of Numbers and the book of Joshua record that Balaam was slaughtered in battle by the Israelites. Ma tovu ohalecha. But hold on a minute. The view of the rabbis, their vicious disassembling of Balaam's character, doesn't fit seamlessly into the Balaam whom we actually read about in our Sedra. Now, I know that when I tried to say a few nice words about Korach recently, I received a number of complaints stating that I had gone soft. And now I'm going to be trying to reclaim a place of modest honor for a wicked, haughty, evil, money-grubbing desert seer. My fellow students, the life of one who comments upon the Torah can be very risky indeed. 2 points I'd like to make. Point number 1. Balaam is painfully human. He knows what is right. He wants to do what is right. He honors the communications link that he has with God, a link that gives him insight into the divine will. But he can be tempted. And he knows when he is being tempted. I think that we can guess from Balak's doubling down on those bribes that he was offering to Balaam that the world also kind of knew that Balaam could be tempted. Balaam twists and turns to find a way to follow God's will. He really does. And yet, to still be able to grab hold of that pot of gold, he wants both. This is a dangerous game. Balak could easily have killed him. God could easily have killed him. And the Israelites, they did kill him. But on that day, maybe just on that day, the voice of God wins. No matter what was going on in Balaam's heart and in his mind, he utters words of enduring blessing. But then he falls. He slips from the summit. The good that he did is washed away by acts of egregious evil. My point number one is that at least Balaam struggled with the moral and ethical issues that he confronted. He tried. He knew right from wrong, but he stumbled then and fell. I can understand Balaam, and maybe, just maybe, I can, in the privacy of my heart, somewhat, little bit, identify with him. Maybe you can as well, just a little bit. Point number two. It was Yitz Greenberg who recently wrote that there is a beautiful gem at the very heart of this story, and we often fail to see it. Balaam was not an Israelite. He most explicitly was not a member of the tribe. He wasn't standing at Mount Sinai with us. He never entered into our particular covenant with God, yet he speaks with deep awareness of what exists in the soul of our people. And his language is touchingly beautiful. A star rises from Jacob. God freed them from Egypt, so blessed are those who bless you, and accursed be those who curse you. And maybe my favorite, this is a people that dwells apart, who can never be reckoned among the nations. Am levado yishkon, a people that dwells apart. He gets us. He really does. He speaks as if the Shekhinah is actually resting upon him, and I can rest my head within that possibility. The life of Balaam teaches us that God's embrace is universal, not restricted to one group, not restricted to one person. Balaam was a Gentile who by his very existence testified to the truth that God's wisdom and love are not reserved just for the Jewish people. As I read the Haftarah from the prophet Micah, the Haftarah that's assigned to this Sedra, I dared to believe that the rabbis who chose that assignment understood God's universal concern for all of humankind. You know this quote. It has been told you, O humanity, what is good and what the eternal requires of you, to do justly, to love kindness, to walk humbly with your God. That's the Haftarah assigned to our Torah passage. Those rabbis, despite their antipathy to Balaam, knew that he was saying things out of a truth that was universal. He, the Gentile prophet. Surely, for many of our teachers, this vision of God as the God of all existence and of all peoples made them uncomfortable. You see this in the Talmud. And they sought to invalidate it, but in 2021, we increasingly are able to see wisdom as flowing to and flowing from all peoples, even as we lift up the eternal covenant of Sinai. So, don't follow the crowd to be so harsh about Balaam. Let a tiny part of your understanding of him include his all too human internal conflict between that which is noble and that which is venal. And see in him the startling truth that spiritual richness and uplifting truths are not solely the possession of the Jewish people. Have a wonderful Shabbat. See you next week. Shabbat Shalom.